Hello, everyone. Happy Friday from here. Today, I'm very excited to have Beth in the Latina Success. Beth is here to talk about why the NPS is no the end of all the metric that we have to be to tracking for our customer success, customer experience. I think a lot of us hear about this metric and well, here I have also Elizabeth, who also is joining me in this podcast. So welcome, ladies. How are you today?
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. Hi, Elizabeth. How are you?
Doing well. Hello, Beth. Very nice to have you.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So, Beth, why don't you start to telling us a little bit about yourself? You have a very interesting background. I remember the first time I met you. Uh, and you were telling me, right, how your path to customer success was very different to the normal path, but it really caught my eye and my attention how much experience you really have that sometimes people doesn't really understand all that value. And I would love to hear from you, your background and your story.
Sure. Thanks so much. So yes, I actually started, almost 30 years ago. And I started in the market research industry. So I was very fortunate. I had graduated from college, and the company that I worked for started a training program. And this is very old school, where they wanted to train people from the ground up, people who did not have degrees in psychology or statistics, which was also very typical for that career at that time. I came in with a degree in education, something totally different. So I spent the first couple of years doing very classic market research, quantitative and qualitative research, worked for a supplier. Then I went to the client side. And then I spent a number of years at creative agencies as a strategic planner. And that was really the first time where I was really able to look at things very holistically, and where basically I realized what my job is it is using psychology, because the idea behind marketing is to influence people's behavior and get them to do something that you want them to do. And then I went back to my roots. And in 2018, I went back to the research supplier side, and I was there for a couple of years. And I had a COVID-induced pause, not by choice, but COVID made that decision for me. And so I took the next couple of years to figure out, okay, what did I want to do next? And this opportunity came up to create Imprint CX with my business partner. And we have a very good roster of executive advisors. So it felt like a really good opportunity. And my business partner and I had worked together previously, very early on in our careers, but our careers diverged. So we had very different skill sets, but they were very complementary. And so the more he started to talk about CX, the more interesting that I thought that it was about really thinking about the customer and their experience, not just thinking about how can I sell more of my clients' products, which is what I had been doing all of these years. And then as I started to get into CX, what I realized was I'd been doing CX this whole time. It was just called something else. And so my background in consumer insights, shopper insights, retailer strategy, brand strategy are the perfect fit for customer experience and employee experience. And because of my background in market research, I have very specific opinions about relying on metrics. And that was how you and I started our conversation, and how I have some very strong opinions.
Yes.
So what else would you like to know?
So yeah, I think I would love to hear that opinion, right? I think it's gonna be interesting conversation. I'm looking forward to hear what Elizabeth wants to say, but also I think there is a lot of our listeners or watchers that are gonna be, feeling probably it's gonna be very polemic topic. Because I think you and I discussed why NPS is not really the metric that really talks about, if your company is having a great experience for your customers or not, right? Yes, in some way help you to kind of see some of the behavior of your customers, but doesn't really oversee, right? What are you delivering to the customer? How really the customer feel about it? And I would love to hear this from you, so I know uh, it's a topic that you really care about.
Yeah, I'm actually curious, Beth, since you have that outsider's advantage in a way that you got into the CX world and you were presented with these metrics, as you said, that were introduced, and that I guess they were telling you that these are the things that we want to measure. Besides NPS, was there anything else that you were presented with that needed to be tracked or measured? I'm just curious, coming from
Right.
yeah.
Coming from my background, there was always NPS is a relatively newer metric. Obviously, it's only about 20 years old, and certainly I had seen it previously in my research roles where you're doing brand health tracking. NPS is a pretty standard metric. But the issue sometimes with brand health trackers, more so brand health trackers, less so advertising trackers, is that it's really lagging data. You only really know how you've affected things after they have happened. And by the time you've collected the data, the opportunity to make a impactful change has come and gone, because by the time you ask people the question and then you get the data and then you analyze the data and then you share the data, you're so far past this experience that somebody has had that it's not really a real, in my opinion, it's not a real-time metric that is very actionable. So things like NPS, things like customer satisfaction, things like ease. I think if you're looking at any one of those individually and you're only using that one number, that is the part that I find problematic, is that so once I came into CX, what it seemed to me is that a lot of organizations were using NPS as a way to track their customer experience, but they were only focused on the one number. And the problem with that is that, well, there's a few problems, but one is it seemed to me that a lot of organizations then became focused on fixing the number, not the problem. So the focus was in the wrong place. That was issue number one. Issue number two is that they were asking the question at the wrong time. So, and this comes from personal experience. So there's a national retailer that I shop at, and every single time I go to the store, I get served an NPS survey. Whether I've bought something at the store, whether I've done a return at the store or whatever, that's not really the right time to ask whether or not I'd be, right? So it's situational, just like CSAT or ease would be. And so I think if you're going to use it, that's fine, but it has to be considered as part of a holistic view of metrics and truly how you're measuring the customer experience. The other issue with NPS is typically, for the most part, the only people who really take the time to respond are the people who are really happy or the people who are really unhappy. So you're getting that polarity. And it's really the people who are the 7, the 8s to the 3s, that is that sort of messy middle that's really where the true insight lies. And in my opinion, a lot of organizations weren't taking the time to investigate that messy middle, because I felt, and again, we're only focused on how do we make the happy people happier, and how do we at least turn detractors into, people who are sort of, at least satisfied. So those are just some of the issues that I have with NPS.
Yeah, that's very aligned with what I've seen. From my perspective, I use NPS exclusively for, working in startup companies, organizations. And for me, obviously, I think I'm preaching to the choir here when I say like that's not the one and all metric, even though I think at this point we understand the why it's being used, because it came from, in a way, it came from the need from the boards to understand in some capacity, how can we measure how is this customer base doing in general. And an NPS has been around for some time. It's been adopted by software companies in that way. So it's been ingrained as part of the deck of the metrics. So it's kind of hard to get it out. So it was like an exercise that had to be done. But for me, more than the number, because I had seen customers churn, go away with a high score. Supposedly, they should have stayed according to that metric, right? They're happy, as in, or satisfied. And I see the customers that had a very low or like maybe average at best, they were best customers, but because they were very critical in terms of the experience, and they were voicing their, in a way, how they felt, and which was fine. We understood, no surprises there. It's because we knew the accounts. Like what I found the most part of it was the insights from the people that actually took the time to write something. Like to me, those were the most impactful that I could actually take and create a story around it to improve the product. So that gave a voice to the number. The number itself didn't really say much other than it's a number, like a good or bad. But the qualitative responses, they were the ones that had the most impact for the sake of having impact in a response in this capacity. So those are the ones that I actually love seeing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Unfortunately, I think, and I'm sure you've seen this too, customers, shoppers get so many surveys, and they're so inundated by every single product, retailer, company that they interact with, that a lot of them don't take the time to give you that really rich feedback, or it's very minimal at best. And you really have to dig deep to get at, okay, what are the trends? What are the themes that we're seeing here? I think you're absolutely right, is combing through that open-ended data is where the richness really lies. But again, in terms of understanding customer experience, the issue that I have is still, it's a little bit late. It's a little bit hard to really act upon it and make impactful change. So, for example, I recently had a networking call with somebody, and they are a software company, and they have an NPS track. They ask NPS. He came in and he changed how they do it. One is they only ask NPS once a year, which I'm like, that's the way to do it, right? Every single time there is a change, an update, somebody does sort of like a very complicated task within their software system, they do ask satisfaction and ease. They take the time to ask satisfaction and ease. However, when they do their NPS survey, it's only 3 questions. It's the NPS question. I forget what the second question is, but I thought the third question was so great. So the third question was, if you were going to renew today, would you? Yes, no, undecided. And based on how somebody responded, that actually triggered one of 3 closed loop processes. So they typically ask this question. They typically survey people when they're about 200 days out from when their renewal date would be. And if somebody says yes, they are contacted by an account manager who says, great, seems like you're interested in renewing. The paperwork was going to come to you in about 60 days anyway. Let's get the ball rolling. It just gets them in faster, right? If somebody says no, they do a deep dive with the account manager to understand what are the issues that they've been having, what challenges, have there been any staff changes? Because one of the things that they realized is chief financial officers become sort of like a big part of the renewal process, because it's about, can you get this cheaper somewhere else? So that triggers a process. And if somebody's undecided, same thing, account manager gets on the phone with them and is like, okay, what's going on? What can we help you with? What are you unsure about? And he found that to be so much more actionable immediately than NPS. And I thought that making that one simple change, which is such a simple question, was so brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other day I was sharing one story in LinkedIn personal, right? That I went through a client who was using a product and got that survey, right? Like, if you're happy with the product, just in general. It didn't ask about the renewal. But that was the only communication she got in a whole year, right? And it was funny because she told me the whole story very emotional. And then she said it was 1 a.m. and it was supposed my renewal coming in the morning of that day. And I just got an email saying your subscription is going to be renewal for 1 year. She said, I replied, I was happy with the product because I was happy with the product. But then in the morning, she got that the new subscription was increased by crazy amount, right? Like nothing even like it was 10% more. No, it was crazy amount. So she said, it was when I was feeling upset because during all this time, nobody really personal as a human reached out to me, right? Yes, I was happy with the product. Will I be paying more for this product? No, because it's not on my budget, right? So I think also that process that you were describing is always in some way implying that a human is going to reach out to that person, right? That is going to make, oh, you're happy with the product. Okay, let me tell you, it's going to have a increase, right? And I want to know, right, if this is on your budget. Because what she created, like what she had right now, is a totally bad experience. So what she's saying, right, is like, oh, never buy that product because in 1 year they are going to raise the price twice or 3 times what you were paying. So people, if they hear that experience, they would say, I'm not buying that product. I'm not going with them. I don't want that happen to me. So how important is those little details, make the whole experience so different. So I think like saying that NPS is not all the metric that is needed. It's more like how can we really adapt it, right? And make it actionable, right? And say it's part of the metric that is giving me an insight how to act and not react, just not to be reactive, but being proactive, which is what customer success is about. And as you were saying, Elizabeth, right? How those stories, those clients who tell the story, and we have been saying this, the 3 of us, right? Usually the one who gets upset or doesn't like it is going to give you the whole story. How we can create those stories and into make them successful, right? Or turn them like, I'm hearing your problem, right? And I'm going to solve it. It's not just going to be a number saying, no, we have 3 happy clients. That's it. No, how we are going to be proactive and try to solve it and try to come back and say, we need to do something with our product or with our service. Or sometimes, I have been in companies that they are not happy because of our billing process. nothing related to the product, nothing related to anything. But they were happy that the invoices get wrong to the wrong person, that they got charges, that were wrong, things like that. They probably are happy with your product, but those little details count to them to say, I don't want to be in a company that is charging me all the time wrong charges and I have to go back and fix it, right? So it's how we're understanding who as a company we are serving that company. There are many touch points and we need to understand how each touch point is helping to have a happy customer at the end, right?
Yeah, it's about being consistent in the experience that you're delivering. I think your example of incorrect invoicing is a really good one, right? It is the kinds of thing, and that is a situation usually where those kinds of things happen because the organization is working in silos. So the account manager and the product person who developed the product, maybe they're more closely aligned. And so you have a customer who's very happy with the product. They're very satisfied with the service that they're receiving. But then you have finance who's not connected to these two other people within the organization at all. And they don't have their act together and they just send out invoices late, wrong person, what have you. And it's the account manager or the company that's going to get dinged because it's right? It's not, nobody's going to think about, well, this is really the finance department's problem. It's the company's problem.
Yep.
And so those kinds of things tend to happen when organizations work in silos. And so that's another thing that I talk about a lot, about how do you have that cross-functional collaboration and how that is so important to delivering good customer experience.
Yeah. And just to be clear, and that's not NPS. NPS cannot give the necessary feedback, because it's feedback at the end. Feedback to the product team, to the finance team, to even the customer success. It's like it doesn't serve that purpose. I work specifically for enterprise companies, and we've only sent it always once a year. We never send it more than that. But and again, that's not the only metric that you can rely on, even for feedback, because you need to come up with different ways to give your product team, your customer success team, your finance team feedback. And also as part of every stage of the process that when you have a customer, what is the journey of that customer? Like every major stage needs to have a way of feedback, a loop process, so that you can have feedback on the process itself and how to improve it. Otherwise, you are flying blind. So that needs to be part of the process for every step of the way that you have that customer, when they become a customer, if they get an onboarding, if they have been with you for X amount of time, if they're close to renewal, after the renewal, like you need to have some sort of feedback process already built in or some other way. You need to come up with those metrics. And that's holistically, you will get a sense of how you're doing, but then independently, you can also assess that, and see who's responsible for that and improve that on its own.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I think the frustration comes with, you get practitioners such as ourselves who understand that, and it's what we talk about and it's what we recommend to the people who hire us. But then there's always a C-suite that is always like, I don't have time to go through all of this. Tell me what's the one number. Tell me what's the one number. Tell me what it is that I have to do, right? So I think there's opportunity. So I think from a practice standpoint, I agree with you 100%. I think it's, how do we make sure that the people that we work with are practicing the behaviors that we preach and are doing those things again and again and creating those holistic stories with all of the data that they've collected and showing how that all ties together, as opposed to a CEO and a CFO and a CTO who are just like, I just need to know, are we good or are we bad? Done. So I think that's part of where the issue lies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that relies when is as a company, right? The company is not seeing themselves as a customer centric, really, right? Like when they just want a number. And as you say, the number really sometimes doesn't tell the whole story, right? Doesn't tell how many really why they are happy, right? And it could be sometimes that they are not even happy because of the product, but because they have a good service, right? They have always somebody who respond their questions and all that. And I say, probably your product is not the best, but I'm happy here because they always support us quickly. So maybe okay, with department we already nail it, but there's something else that we need to know. And yeah, it's funny because I have seen a lot of companies that they talk about being customer centric. When you go and realize their process is like, okay, I don't see anything here that talks about customer centric. And I think another important thing, especially for big enterprises, as Elizabeth was talking about, I think that there are companies that do have totally different segments, right? And that probably is when you need kind of to have one number. But I think it's important to, as you have those segments, to understand if that number is going to be talking for each segment or for everybody, how you're going to split that data, right? And I would say careful about the segment that is part of your biggest revenue or your North Star. Because if you're trying to put everybody in the same box, is when you have this problem. Not all your customers are the same. No, it's not the same having an account that gives you 1 million of revenue versus one that is giving you 100, right? So how you are going to be defining that metric is really impacting the segment that your company cares. It's not that you don't care about the other ones, but it's like, this is the segment that I really need to take care of. Is that number really representing that segment? So this is where it is the key, right? How to use those kind of metrics.
Yeah. And it's really up to the leaders of this company to also change the narrative. Like, for example, at my last company, we reported NPS, but we also came up with other metrics. Like one of the ones that we wanted to track because we thought it was important was time to value. How long does it take for a customer to get value? And it was, a complex type of product. So that was important to know, like, how long does it take for a customer to start getting value? And we work on that number to reduce it or to keep it healthy. That was a great indicator that people that were coming on board, they were actually getting to see the value of the product that they bought, right? As opposed to somebody that buys something doesn't get to use it for some time. So that was important for us to measure, and we started resurfacing that in the board deck or sending it to the board deck and having a story around those extra metrics that we had captured in addition to the other ones, the typical one, let's put it that way. So, but it takes people and, leaders that understand that and want to change the narrative. And it's going to be good for the long term, right?
Yeah, agree. Absolutely.
Perfect. So we are getting to the end of this podcast, which every time I always say the same, right? But I think these conversations can be for hours and hours and so on. But anyways, Ben, thank you so much because I think your insights, and all your experience in the research industry, has been very awesome to hear about it. And I think I really love this topic too, because it's always that I always try to make people realize, right? Like what really we want to measure, who really are going to be doing it, right? What is going to be the purpose of doing it? Not just because everybody does it, we need to do it, right? Not because it is the standard to do it, we have to do it. It has to come with something that is more than just doing it because we have to.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree. Thank you so much. Yeah, I enjoyed our initial conversation. This was great. Elizabeth, it was really nice to meet you and to exchange, thoughts and opinions with you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It was very nice. Are you still in Ireland?
No, I'm back in New York.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you so much, ladies. Thank you, everybody, to listen to this podcast. We will talk soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.